Hello, everyone. I wanted to go over the Kant exam, give you an idea of the kind of answers I was looking for. Once you've watched this video, feel free to contact me to go over your particular exam in more detail. But I'd ask you to watch this video first, so just have a general basis for it. But I would encourage you, if you have any questions, to contact me by phone or email, and we'll set up a meeting to go over your exam. First question, what is the general idea of a categorical imperative? I wasn't looking for a statement of either one of the categorical imperatives that Kant offers, but the general idea, what is a categorical imperative? What's the basic notion of it? And I think that the best way to go about it would be to define the actual terms involved, imperative and categorical. And an imperative is a command or an order. And something is categorical if it is exceptionless and unconditional. So, a way to define a categorical imperative is an unconditional, exceptionless command. Now, of course, there are other ways of doing it, but I think that is the best way of doing it, getting to the heart of it, as is, I think, unavoidable in an exam like this where I'm asking you to formulate ideas. I have to use my judgment in terms of what a good answer is. And there's a lot of half credit. So I have to make a judgment about things. And people can get at things in different ways, but those are the essential ideas that an imperative is a command or order, and something is categorical if it is unconditional and exceptionless. Number two, explain the importance of universalizability to Kant's first categorical imperative. Remember, the first categorical imperative asks you to formulate a maxim of action, or what your rule of action is. That's the first step. The second step is to ask whether it's universalizable. That is, whether it can serve as a law for everyone. If it can, then it's okay to do. If it can't be universalized, then it cannot. So universalizability is asking oneself whether this can serve as a law for everyone. Now, again, there's different ways of getting at it, but I think that that's the most direct. Number three, according to Kant, how do we know whether the will is good? That's a pretty simple answer, I think, and that is whether the will is prompted by a recognition of duty. And duty is the really most important term here. Again, you have to use your judgment in grading answers. Somebody may mention duty, but not in the most relevant way. They may have a longer answer that talks about a lot of things which really aren't terribly relevant to the question, and then they mention duty, but not in that sense that the will is good if it is prompted by a recognition of duty. Now, you could go on about the moral law, obviously. Duty to what? Duty to the moral law, but that's not really asked in this question. But again, there are other ways of getting at it. And I have to use my judgment about whether the answer is really sufficient. So again, I want to reiterate that if you have questions about how I graded your exam, or you think that you might have, answered the question correctly and not gotten credit for it, please contact me. Number four, Kant believes that most things have mere relative or subjective value. That is, they have value relative to someone's valuing it or someone's desiring it. Just a sec, I gotta answer a call. Sorry about the interruption. Most things have mere relative value or subjective value. That is, they have value, but only relative to someone's desiring it or wanting it. But what, in his opinion, has objective or intrinsic value, that is, something which is valuable in itself. And saying that it has value does not depend on anyone valuing it. It just is intrinsically valuable. Honestly, there are a few answers here. The one that I was thinking of was persons. Some people said humans, and I accepted that because we weren't able to go too far into the distinction between a human being and a person. I think that Kant, in what we read, is ambiguous about that. He really means rational creature, but human being was an acceptable answer. But it's really persons that Kant, because he thinks that there are possible beings that are persons that are not human. And it leads into difficult questions about people who may be human and not persons. But for the moment, I think human beings is what I accepted as a correct answer. Other possible answers were a goodwill, because he starts the book by saying a goodwill is the only thing in the world that is good in itself. And another possible answer would be the moral law. Those were not the things I had directly in mind, but I really have to say that they would be a correct answer. So if you said those things, I also accepted it. And then number 5, write a Kantian ethical analysis of the following scenario. Now, the scenario is what it is. It's just something I made up. And yes, there are details, and I tried to set it up in a way that would make it amenable to a Kantian analysis. But the real thing here is, what is a Kantian analysis? A Kantian analysis of anything, as far as we're concerned, is the application of the 2 categorical imperatives. So to really do a Kantian analysis of this or any moral scenario, or scenario having to do with ethics, is to apply the 2 categorical imperatives. That is, first, ask whether Julie's rule of action can be universalized. And the second, whether Julie would be using anybody as a means to one of her ends and not treating them as an end in themselves. Or, it wasn't exactly completely clear that we're focusing on Julie's actions here. There is a second party who is the loan officer, and that was fine too, because the whole point of a thing is to do a Kantian analysis of something. So that really doesn't matter so much. Nor does the outcome, your answer. Well, she was not unethical, or she was indeed ethical, and I got all sorts of answers in terms of that, which is fine. And there is no correct answer as far as I'm concerned, but there is a correct method, and that is to apply the categorical imperatives. That's what a Kantian analysis is. So there might have been some partial credit for doing it another way, but really that's what I was looking for, was say, Kantian analysis, that means running the thing through the 2 categorical imperatives and coming up with some answer. So what answer you got in terms of whether you thought that Julie was ethical or not was not a basis for saying the answer was right or wrong. The basis for saying the answer was right or wrong is whether you did used an application or applied the 2 categorical imperatives. So that's what I had in mind for the Kant exam. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me.